So welcome back to another tutorial session with Grand Measures Academic Support Services. Today we're continuing our look at manufacturing overheads. However, we are taking another step further. Last week we had looked at how it affected a manufacturing business, right? And our important statement that we have is that the principle applies when passing on costs in a service entity, but we're still finding OAR, we're still doing up our manufacturing overhead account if the need arises for us to declare a variance, etc. Right? So let's look at how this would look for an ordinary business in which you would have production departments and you would have service departments, right? So let's read our question for today. So you're a cost accountant of an industrial concern. You've been given the following budgeted information regarding 4 cost centers in your organization. So the first table we're seeing, we have 4 departments, right? You have department 1, department 2, the maintenance department, and the canteen department. We have some costs, and the first 2 costs, indirect labor and consumables, those are already allocated for us. The remaining costs, all we have is the total cost. So just by looking at this, okay, we're getting the idea that this total cost would have been shared by all the departments in this organization. So there's somewhere in the question that I believe just by reading it, it's going to ask us to share this cost with all these departments. And thinking back, how would we be sharing these costs, right? There would be some basis of allocation, some form of cost driver, if that's if for a lack of a better word for it, right? But we need to have some basis of apportioning and dividing these costs among the various departments. So the next table, it says we're giving these additional information. And it's additional information for all 4 departments. You're seeing floor space, you're seeing book value, okay, number of employees within each, and we're seeing kilowatt hours, okay. So here we're having variables. These variables to me are looking like variables that we can use based on the cost that we have at the top. And the one that strikes out to me is power. And power, we know, is measured in kilowatts. And if we have the total cost for power, and then we're seeing how much kilowatts each department here would have used, then we can better be able to divide that using some form of math, right? But we'll come back to it once you go to our required and see what the question is asking us. But before we go to that, we're also told some other information. So we're seeing here where the canteen staff are outside contractors. So, okay, we wouldn't have employed employees to work in the canteen for any supervision, etc. All right. B, departments 1 and 2 are production cost centers, and the maintenance are service cost centers, right? So cost centers mean, okay, they accumulate costs. They're doing work that is going to be a cost for them. But production cost centers, okay, their cost is based on producing something, right? So what we call those are, okay, they're generating revenue because they're producing something to sell, right? So essentially, you could say these departments can pay for their costs. But you have maintenance and canteen that are service cost centers. So the business that we have, it's an industrial business. It manufactures stuff. So these service cost centers, they provide services to the other departments, to the production and other service departments within the business. But they are not necessarily departments that work to produce revenue, right? So this information is very important. So because they're not providing revenue or they're not servicing outside persons, they're servicing persons within the organization, employees. So what this would mean, and I know I'm jumping the gun, but I just want to explain it a little bit. What this would mean is that yes, these service cost centers within a business, and maintenance and canteen are not the only two. A very important one is HR, another is accounting, right? They provide essential service for the functioning of the business, right? So that production can actually produce to make revenue for the business. So what you're saying, okay, at the end of the day, these departments will use light, right? They will have machines that will be depreciating, right? They will be taking up space, etc. If in terms of your paying rent. So they will have their own costs, but who or what finances these costs? So here, going down to requirement 1, where it's asking us to do the overhead cost statement and show allocation and apportionment. These costs within service centers at the end of the period is now reapportioned, right? Reapportioned based on some form of cost allocation basis, based on some form of cost driver, right, to the production departments. And then they in turn have this additional cost separate and apart from their own. And this is a cost that they incur because HR provides services to them, maintenance provides services to them, and the canteen provides services to them. So just wanted to be a little bit more detailed with that point. So point C says, the maintenance department provides 4,000 service hours to department 1 and 3,000 service hours to department 2. So this again ties into what I was explaining. So the maintenance provides service to these two departments. Remember, the canteen, it's contracted to outside contractors, right? So here we're seeing, okay, what's the basis on which we'll divide or split up, if you want to say, the cost, the total cost in the department, in the maintenance department. We'll be doing this based on the service hours that it gives to the various departments, right? Additional note D, it says department 1, which is a production department, is maintenance machine intensive, and department 2 is labor intensive. This ties in with point E, where it says 6,320 machine hours and 7,850 labor hours are budgeted for departments 1 and 2 respectively for the year. So what this is saying is that what this is speaking to here, remember, and I will say, we find OAR, right, for departments. What type of departments? We'd find that for production departments. Why? Because service cost centers, their costs are reapportioned to production departments. So these two information that we have here, these are actually our cost drivers for departments 1 and 2 that we will be using to find our overhead absorption rate, which is the second requirement. So taking all that in, I would have read the requirements before, where 1 says prepare an overhead cost statement showing the allocation and apportionment of overhead to the 4 cost centers, right? And part 2 says calculate the overhead absorption rates for departments 1 and 2. So let's get into it. So the first thing that we're doing here is to do our statement. But before we go any further, this is what we have at the moment. We have some costs, right? The first 2, indirect labor and consumables, those were allocated for us already, right? The remaining from heat and light to power, all we know is the total cost, right? But based on that, we would know and we would assume, right, that the total cost, it needs to be split among our 4 departments. So how do we go about doing that? Right, and in the initial stage of the question, I hinted at, okay, how are we dividing these costs, we have to have some form of basis. So given all these costs, we have to go back somewhere in the question, right, to find some form of basis for these costs. So looking back at the question, right, we have the costs, we have the totals. Anywhere in the question that gives you any additional information that could speak to how we'd be dividing these costs. Yes, that's seen in the second table that we have here. So these are bases that we could divide some type of cost, right? So by going through the varying ones here, we have heat and lighting. What would be the best one for that, right? Between the four that we have here. For rent and rates, what would be the best one to do that? For depreciation, which one would it be? Book value, that speaks to depreciation, right? Supervision. Supervision would be based on how many persons you're supervising. So number of employees we're seeing here. And power that we went through before would have more than likely be kilowatts, right? So now we would have determined our basis of apportionment. So now we know that. And now we can go ahead and split the cost. So I'm going to do heat and light for you, and then you'll do the rest, because knowing one is the same way we're doing the others, right? So we have heat and lighting, and we have $12,000 to share amongst the four departments. We're saying we're using, what's the basis for heat and lighting? Floor area. So, okay, we have floor area department 1 using 10,000 floor space, department 2, 12, maintenance 5, and the canteen has 3,000 floor space in square meters, right? So that's a total of 30,000 floor space in square meters, and we're trying to divide $12,000. So how are we going to go about doing this? So what we're saying for department 1, who has 10,000 of the 30,000 square feet, we're then going to divide that 10 upon the 30 multiplied by the $12,000. So we're saying department 1 that occupies 1/3 of the entire square space should pay 1/3 of the cost, right? So that's what we're doing. And 1/3 of the cost, which is 10,000 upon 30, that's 1/3 of 12,000 is 4,000. We do the same for department 2. Department 2 occupies 4,000 square space of the 30,000 floor space, right? Multiply that by 12, we get 4,800. We do the same for maintenance. Maintenance occupy 5,000 of the 30,000 multiplied by the 12,000, we get 2,000. And the canteen occupies 3,000. Do the same multiplication and we get 1,200. Point to note, if we're supposed to add these costs at the end, we should end up back with $12,000 being shared. So we would do this for all the costs that we have. So we put in those figures for heat and lighting, and we do the same for rent and rates, depreciation, supervision, power. We sum the basis of allocation, then we put each upon the total and we multiply by the total cost that we're trying to share to get each department's figure, right? So just to go back for you to see how we did heating. And what we're saying is do the same with the others. So we would have done that and we would have filled out our table. What I want to bring your attention to is supervision. Supervision costs, and the basis is number of employees. But what we want to note is that in canteen, there is no supervision cost. And the reason for that is because, first, not only did our additional table not have any employees here, so you couldn't think that is an error, but also you got additional information that said canteen staff are outside contractors. It's outsourced. So there is no reason for us to provide supervision for them, right? So just to clear that up. So now that we would have all our costs for all departments, right? Canteen maintenance, which are the 2 service departments, and the 2 production, which is department 1 and 2. What do we need now to do? Remember, we're saying the service departments, they wouldn't have an OAR. What we're saying is that the service departments, they provided their services to the production departments, to other departments, other production and service departments within the business. So their costs are absorbed by those departments, right? So what we need to do is to reapportion the service department's costs to additional service departments that they provide service to and to the production departments that they provide service to. So how do we go about that? So as you can see, we have reapportionment is the next heading that we have, and we're using the same schedule, the same statement. And we're starting from the rightmost department. So whichever is the last department that they gave in the table is the last department you're gonna use. So the rightmost one that we have is canteen. And this is evident why we start with canteen. And our canteen cost is being shared with everything to its left, right? So we're gonna be sharing canteen costs with maintenance because canteen would have provided services to those in maintenance, right? Food would have been provided for those in the department 1, and food would also have been provided for those in department 2, right? So how do we go about sharing these costs? How do we go about sharing these costs, right? So the first thing we need to do is to find, So yes, we're apportioning both the canteen and the maintenance, right? So we have apportionment, we have them here. Then what we're gonna find after that is budgeted overheads. So the first thing we need to do, as I was indicating prior, is to find the total cost in the canteen department. So here, I would have jumped the gun. The sum of all these costs, indirect labor, consumables, straight down to power, would have summed to 30,000. We're reapportioning the cost. So at the end of the day, we're taking this 30,000 and we're dividing it among all the other departments. So at the end of the day, canteen should be equal to 0. So these are positive figures, right? And if we want it to be equal to 0, we have to subtract. So here, this is positive 30,000. So to get 0, we have to subtract 30,000. And in accounts, we say brackets indicate subtraction. So we sum it, we get 30. So what we do, we put this 30 in brackets to show that we're nilling it off. What do we do with this $30,000? We say we're gonna reapportion it, we're gonna divide it amongst the other departments. But how? We need some basis of apportionment. What's our basis? So our basis here is gonna be number of employees, right? The best one based on going back to the question and looking what the question said. And if, let's go back to it. The question here, this table is what we're using to possibly indicate a basis or if we had any additional information. The only information we have over here in canteen is that it's outside contractors. So we have to come to a table. And the best one here is number of employees. So that's what we're saying. Apportioning our canteen costs is on the basis of number of employees. So we're taking this 30,000 and we're splitting it amongst the other 3 departments. It's the same method, right? It's $30,000 to be shared among, we have number of employees in department 1, 2, and 3, maintenance, which is 80. So what we say for department 1, it's gonna be 40 upon the 80, which is half of the $30,000 would be for department 1, right? The highest amount would be for the department that has the most employees, right? Department 2, 30 upon 80 times the 30, and maintenance, 10 upon 80 times the 30, we get 3,750. And again, here, we're reapportioning canteen costs. So therefore, nothing would be going to canteen. So at the end of the day, the total that we get here should be equal to $30,000 because that's what we're sharing up. So we put that in the various departments slot. So now maintenance has an additional 3,750 costs to take into consideration. Department 2 also has 11,250. Department 1 has $15,000 for services rendered from the canteen department, right? So the next service department that we're doing to the right, to the left of canteen is maintenance. And we're doing the same thing. We're summing all the costs here, including this 3,750, right? And that would give you 43,750. Remember, we're reapportioning it. We're trying to nil this department's cost, right? So we're putting that same 43,750 in brackets. If you're supposed to do the math, adding all this and subtracting this, at the end of the day, you should get 0. So this 43,750, we're now dividing between Department 2 and Department 1. Again, we need some form of basis. What's the basis for maintenance? Service hours. And why we say service hours, let's go back to the question. So first, let's come over here. Or if we want to look at our table, we have a department called maintenance, and maintenance provides services to other departments. Would any of these fit? It wouldn't be kilowatt hours. Floor space, maintenance has their own. When they come to the other departments, they're not working based on floor space, right? Book value, not necessarily. Number of employees, they're not providing service based on number of employees, no. So we come over to our additional information and we go through. And point C is what we're looking at, where it says the maintenance department provides 4,000 service hours to Department 1 and 3,000 to Department 2. So this here would tell us what drives the cost in maintenance department. It is driven by the amount of service hours that it provides to the other departments. So noting that, we come here, we're splitting up maintenance costs for the 3,750 between Department 1, 4,000 service hours, Department 2, 3,000 service hours. We're dividing maintenance department service hours, so nothing would be there. We would have already, right, divided canteen. But another point to note, remember in the question, it says that what? Canteen is outsourced. So therefore, there is no reason for the maintenance department to be providing services to the canteen. So here, we're just splitting that cost among these two departments, and we would do it in the same manner that we would have done any other allocation or reapportionment. So Department 1, 4,000 upon a total 7,000 multiplied by the total cost. Department 2, 3,000 upon the total 7,000 multiplied by the cost. We're supposed to sum these two, would have gotten back 43,750, my bad, and not 30,000, right? So we would have put that in there. Department 2 and 1, getting their respective maintenance costs. Based on services, maintenance will have provided them. So now that we would have reapportioned, all the service departments costs to production departments, we can now find budgeted overheads for our production departments. So the sum for both departments here, respectively, Department 1, 158,000, Department 2, 157,000. So this is our overhead cost statement, right? At the end of the day, our production departments will say, okay, this was what happened. Yes, we would have had service departments providing services to us. However, those costs would have been reapportioned to us because, as I said, our service department provides services to us. So their costs are reallocated to us. So we would have completed part 1 of the question where we did the allocation of the cost that we have here and the reapportionment from service centers to production centers. So part 2 says calculate the overhead absorption rate for departments 1 and 2. And just to backtrack, what's the formula for overhead absorption rate? That's total estimated overheads divided by total estimated units of the cost driver, right? And I think we have those information available to us. So first for department 1, we have our budgeted overheads, 158 here, right? So we need to find our cost driver. So scanning through the question, department 1, we really cannot use any of these information as cost drivers because we're only speaking to department 1, right? So we come back over here in this additional information section and we did speak about it. Point D and E, right? Department 1 is machine intensive. So our cost driver is gonna be machine hours. Department 2 is what? Labor intensive. So our cost driver is gonna be labor hours. So department 1, machine hours, 6,320. So respectively, these are our overheads. Department 1, it's gonna be the cost divided by our cost driver, giving us our OAR, which is $25 per machine hour. Department 2, $20 per machine hour. So remember, we have to keep our dollars and our units because units into dollars gives you dollars per unit, right? So this is the end of our question. This is just going back over for a question today. If you have any questions, remember to leave it in our comments. We will ensure that we respond to you. Remember to keep our family growing, to subscribe to our channel, share this video with anyone who you think this is of essential use to, right? Any of your friends, even your relatives, just to get them to subscribe and to allow our family to grow. Remember to give this video a thumbs up for us as well, right? You can always reach out to us via email with any question that you may have, any problems that you may want us to help you solve. You can reach out via email or via Instagram. So until next time for another question.